My parents gaslit me into thinking my sister was crazy. It took my dad nearly culling me to see she was the only one fighting for my life. Growing up as the youngest child meant I molded myself to be the type to only speak when spoken to, because the last thing I wanted was to be like my older sister, Millie. Whenever my dad abused me or my brother, she refused to ignore it. One time, we were all on holiday in Florida when I was wearing jean shorts. I must have been 12, while our brother Evan was 13 and Millie was 15. My dad lightly slapped my thigh and told me I was getting fat. I was a size US 2. I glared at my sister, warning her not to say anything, and she wasn't going to until my dad tugged on the end of my shorts and told me to cover up. That's when she went off. What the F did dad just say? She asked my mom, who was also trying to get her to shut up. Suddenly, the entire room, including me, started screaming at her. Told her how she was a troublemaker. Looking back, I obviously regret it, but I was brainwashed, because somehow my parents had convinced me that it's their responsibility to be abusive, but speaking back was what caused an issue. And it didn't stop there, because that's when Evan did the only form of protection he knew at the time. He plastered this boyish smirk on his face, pretending like he didn't give an F about anything my dad did or said. Next thing I knew, our dad was yelling at Evan and threatening to hit him. So that night, Millie slept in the same bed as us, covering Evan in case our dad came in the middle of the night and tried anything. But as the years continued, things only got worse. Evan used to be a sweet boy. He used to tuck me and Millie in with a blanket whenever we fell asleep on the couch, tell us that we were pretty. But as my dad got more abusive, so did he. So by the time he was 16, he was just another angry man in the house. But Millie never lost her flair of assertiveness, and I continued to be the one to cry at the first sign of conflict. This dynamic pretty much continued until Millie was in senior year. It was the night before her SAT, and we were all sitting around the table eating dinner. She was the only one in our family that cared about school. Her hands were trembling. She had that faraway look in her eye. Well, that's when she asked Evan to stop chewing with his mouth open. "You're going to fail your stats and be an effing failure for the rest of your life," he yelled. Suddenly, Millie stood up in tears and ran up to her bedroom. My dad began shouting at the top of his lungs, his voice echoing off the walls. Meanwhile, I stayed in the kitchen, texting Millie and asking why she would react to him saying that she had once again destroyed the peace in our family. We didn't see her much after that. She was always at her friend's house or secretly out partying, and I never texted her either, because to me, she was the one who had destroyed the family. But the less I saw her, the more I realized how wrong I was, because suddenly I became the new scapegoat. Every day my dad was barking orders at me, and no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. Meanwhile, even he was too scared of Evan to tell him to do anything. But Millie never stopped trying for me. Once in a while, she would come home and criticize our parents, and I didn't even appreciate it until one day, when our dad caught Evan putting his wet clothes on top of my mom's dry ones. Dad was screaming at Evan, when suddenly my name was called for me to come into the living room. As soon as I walked in, my dad called me an ugly bitch who couldn't keep my brother in control, and while I silently processed his words, he pushed me over the coffee table. Tears were streaming down my face and fear filled my veins. When I tried to stand back up, he kicked the back of my legs and knocked me over again. "Get the F out of here." Well, he didn't have to tell me twice. I immediately ran to the bathroom and locked the door. I called the first person I could think of, Millie. I told her everything. She talked to me in that soft voice that always managed to calm me down. As I sat on the cold bathroom floor, my dad screamed at me again and ordered me to clean the kitchen, so I hung up with no explanation. Well, 20 minutes later, I heard the front door silently creak open. Millie walked in with her 6'4" muscular boyfriend. I stared at her with fear, not wanting to leave in case my dad punished me even worse, and I guess she picked up on it, because she immediately grabbed my hand. Her eyes were filled with comfort, like she knew what she was doing. Before I knew it, she had convinced me to leave with her, and we went to an apartment I didn't even know she had been renting out. I tucked myself into bed, and she asked me to again explain what happened, to tell her what she had missed, but I didn't want to think about it anymore. I just wanted to focus on the Halloween party that I had planned for the next day. So I violently shook my head, and Millie nodded before ordering me McDonald's. But I never got to go to my party, because the next day, my mom texted me about how I had to come home, how Millie had done enough damage to all of us, and I believed her. But as soon as I walked in the door, my dad hit me so hard I blacked out. His palm connected with my cheek with a crack that seemed to echo through my skull. Stars exploded behind my eyes, then darkness. I came to on the floor, my head throbbing, the taste of copper in my mouth. That was the moment I knew I couldn't stay. Not one more night. "I'm sure," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "I want to leave." The words hung in the air between us, impossible to take back. They tasted like freedom. "Good," Millie replied. "I need you to be smart about this. Pack only what you absolutely need. Clothes, important documents if you can get them, anything sentimental you can't replace. Nothing bulky. One backpack. That's it." Her voice was calm but urgent, like a general planning a strategic retreat. My heart raced as I listened to her instructions. This was really happening. The reality of what we were planning sank in, heavy and terrifying yet somehow liberating. "When?" I whispered, my mouth dry as sandpaper. My tongue felt too big for my mouth, clumsy with fear and anticipation. "Friday. Tell them you're going to a friend's house for a school project sleepover. I'll pick you up 2 blocks from your house at 7 p.m. Can you do that?" Millie's eyes were intense, focused entirely on me. She'd always had that ability to make you feel like you were the only person in the world when she looked at you. Yes, I didn't even hesitate. The certainty in my voice surprised even me. "And don't tell anyone. Not your friends, not your teachers, no one." Her emphasis on the last word made me nod solemnly. I understood the stakes. This wasn't a game. After we hung up, I sat on my bed staring at the wall, tracing the hairline cracks with my eyes. The paint was peeling slightly in the corner, revealing layers of different colors from previous owners. 3 more days in this house. I could do this. I had to. The following day, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. Nothing had changed. My dad barked orders at breakfast. My mom pretended everything was fine. Evan glared at me from across the table, but knowing I had an escape plan made it all slightly more bearable. The cereal tasted the same, the milk just as cold, but something inside me had shifted. I was no longer trapped. At school, I approached my English teacher after class. The classroom was empty except for us, the afternoon sun slanting through the blinds and casting striped shadows across her desk. "Mr. Parker, I was wondering if I could use you as a reference for a summer job application." My voice only wavered slightly. She looked surprised but pleased. Her smile crinkled the corners of her eyes behind her glasses. "Of course. When do you need it by? Maybe next week? I'll let you know." I needed someone outside my family who could vouch for me if things got complicated later. Someone who knew me as a good student, not just a disobedient daughter. That afternoon, I started gathering my things, bit by bit, so no one would notice. I slipped my birth certificate from the filing cabinet in the den while my mom was on the phone. The paper felt fragile between my fingers, impossibly important. I tucked my school ID and the $43 I'd saved from birthday money into a sock. I sorted through my clothes, mentally selecting what to take. What would I need for a new life? What could I leave behind? I found an old iPod and started recording my dad's outbursts whenever I could. Proof of what was happening in case anyone ever questioned me. The device was small enough to hide in my pocket, the red recording light covered with a piece of tape. Each time I pressed record, my pulse quickened with a mixture of fear and determination. Thursday night, I barely slept. Every creak in the house made me jump. The wind against the window sounded like fingers tapping, like someone trying to get in. What if they somehow knew? What if my dad was waiting to catch me in the act of leaving? I stared at the ceiling, watching shadows move across it as cars passed outside, their headlights briefly illuminating my room. Friday morning, I forced myself to act normal. I ate breakfast, went to school, came home, and cleaned the kitchen like always. The routine felt surreal, like I was watching someone else go through the motions. At dinner, I casually mentioned the fake school project. The spaghetti on my plate went largely untouched. My stomach too knotted with anxiety to eat. Sarah needs help with her science presentation. Her mom said I could sleep over so we can finish it. I kept my eyes on my plate, pushing food around with my fork. The lie came out smoother than I expected. My mom narrowed her eyes. "Which Sarah is this?" Her tone was suspicious. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. I'd prepared for this. "Sarah Chen, from my biology class. You met her mom at the school open house last year." This was all true. Sarah was real, though we weren't close, and our moms had indeed met once. The details made the lie more believable, harder to question. "I don't remember approving this," my dad said. Fork paused halfway to his mouth, a piece of chicken dangling precariously. His eyes were hard, searching my face for signs of deception. "Mom did," I lied, turning to her. "Remember when I asked on Tuesday? I held held my breath, waiting for her response. The seconds stretched out painfully. My mom hesitated. I could see her trying to decide whether to admit she didn't remember or just go along with it. The internal calculation played out across her face, which would cause less conflict. Oh right, she finally said. But be back by noon tomorrow. You have chores. She returned to her meal. The matter settled. I exhaled slowly, careful not to show my relief. At 6:30, I shouldered my backpack, trying to look casual, though it contained everything I planned to take with me. The weight of my life reduced to a single bag. The iPod was tucked safely in my coat pocket, heavy with recorded evidence of what I was escaping. Don't stay up all night giggling with your friend, my mom said as I headed for the door. Her voice was almost normal, almost maternal. For a second, I almost wavered. I won't. My dad didn't even look up from the TV. The blue light flickered across his face, casting strange shadows. Evan was out somewhere, which was a relief. One less goodbye I didn't want to make. I walked normally until I turned the corner, then broke into a run. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. The evening air was cool against my face, carrying the scent of someone's dinner cooking, of freshly cut grass. What if Millie didn't show up? What if this was all some kind of test? But exactly at 7, a car pulled up beside me. Millie leaned across and pushed open the passenger door. Get in, she said. I threw my backpack in and climbed in after it. The car smelled like coffee and Millie's perfume. Before I could even close the door properly, Millie was pulling away from the curb. The tires squealed slightly as we accelerated, the only sign of her urgency. Did anyone follow you? She asked, checking the rearview mirror. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel, her profile tense in the dim light. No, I don't think so. I turned to look out the back window anyway, half expecting to see my dad's car bearing down on us. She nodded, her eyes still flicking between the road and the mirror. We're not going back to my old apartment. I found a new place. It's smaller, but it's in a secure building with keycard access. No one gets in without being buzzed up. Her voice was steady, practical. She thought of everything. I hadn't even thought about that. Of course we couldn't go back to the apartment my parents knew about. The realization of how much planning she'd done for me hit me hard. While I'd been surviving day to day, she'd been creating an escape route. What about your boyfriend, Jason, right? I remembered his imposing presence in our kitchen, how small my dad had seemed next to him. We broke up, she said shortly. He thought I was obsessing too much about our family, said I needed to move on. She made air quotes with one hand while steering with the other, her knuckles white against the wheel. The bitterness in her voice was palpable, a rare crack in her composure. We drove in silence for a while. The farther we got from home, the lighter I felt, like I was shedding a heavy coat I'd been forced to wear. Street by street, mile by mile, the weight lifted. I watched unfamiliar neighborhoods pass by, wondering what kind of life people lived in those houses with their warm windows and unknown stories. They're going to be so angry, I finally said, watching the familiar streets disappear behind us. The thought sent a chill down my spine despite the car's heater blowing warm air on my face. Millie glanced at me. Are you having second thoughts? Her voice was careful, neutral, not pushing, not judging. Amber, I know what's coming. The explosion, the blame, the guilt trips. I could already hear my mom's voice, see my dad's rage. She nodded grimly. Yeah, me too. The shared understanding passed between us, requiring no further explanation. We both knew exactly what they were capable of. The new apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building with a security door at the entrance. It was tiny, just one bedroom, a bathroom, and a combined kitchen living area, but it was clean and bright. The walls were a soft cream color, bare except for one small framed print of a beach scene. The furniture was minimal but functional. A couch, a coffee table, a small dining set. Nothing fancy, but nothing broken or stained either. You can have the bedroom, Millie said, dropping my backpack on the bed. I'll take the couch. The bed was neatly made with a blue comforter that looked new. No, I can't take your— I started to protest, but she cut me off with a wave of her hand. It's fine. I work late shifts anyway. We'll barely overlap. Her tone made it clear the matter wasn't up for discussion. I looked around the sparse room. There was a bed, a small dresser, and not much else, but it felt safer than any room I'd been in for years. No shouting on the other side of the wall, no footsteps to listen for, no holding my breath when a door opened. Thank you, I whispered. The words felt inadequate for what she'd done. Millie's face softened. You're my sister. I wasn't going to leave you there. She squeezed my shoulder once and turned away, but not before I saw the shimmer of tears in her eyes. That night, I slept better than I had in months, maybe years. No listening for footsteps in the hall, no bracing for the next explosion, just quiet. The mattress was firmer than mine at home, the pillow fluffier. Outside, the occasional car passed, but the sound was distant, unthreatening. I drifted off to the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the soft sound of Millie typing on her laptop in the living room. The peace lasted exactly until 10:07 the next morning, when my phone exploded with texts from my mom. The buzzing woke me from a deep sleep, my heart instantly racing before I even read the messages. Where are you? Sarah's mom says you never showed up. Answer me right now. Your father is furious. I showed the messages to Millie, my hands shaking. The screen of my phone lit up with another incoming text, then another. They came so quickly the phone barely stopped vibrating. Turn off your phone, she said. We knew this was coming. Her calmness steadied me, reminded me that we had anticipated this. I hesitated, then typed one message. I'm safe. I'm not coming back. Then I powered off my phone and set it on the counter. The silence that followed felt both terrifying and liberating. What now? I asked. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting a warm rectangle on the linoleum floor. It was strange how normal everything looked when my entire life had just changed. Now we wait. They'll escalate before they back down. She was right. By that evening, we'd received 6 voicemails on Millie's phone. The first few were from my mom, alternating between threats and tearful pleas. Her voice went from angry to broken and back again, a familiar cycle I'd heard my whole life. The last one was from my dad. If you don't bring her home right now, you'll regret it, he growled. Both of you will. His voice sent a chill down my spine despite the warmth of the apartment. Some conditioned responses were hard to shake. Millie deleted them all without responding. Her finger pressed the delete button with a finality that felt like closing a door. The next day, Sunday, my phone pinged with a text from Evan. I turned it back on briefly to check messages. The notification made my stomach drop, but I forced myself to read it. Don't expect anything from us when he dies. Just that. No explanation of who he was or what he meant. The cryptic nature of it felt deliberately cruel, designed to make me imagine the worst. I showed it to Millie. He's trying to guilt you, she said. Dad probably put him up to it. You know how he's always making vague threats about his health when he wants attention. Remember when he told us his heart was giving out because Evan wanted to go to summer camp? Her voice was steady, but I noticed how she bit her lip after saying it, like she wasn't entirely sure. A small gesture that betrayed her own worry, despite her reassuring words. The possibility that something might actually be wrong nagged at me, but I pushed it away. We'd heard too many false alarms to trust this one. Monday morning, Millie helped me enroll at a new school. We had to use her address and say she was my guardian, which wasn't technically true, but the administration didn't ask too many questions. The school was larger than my old one, the hallways wider and brighter. No one stared at me as we walked through the office. I was just another new student, unremarkable and unknown. What if they come looking for me? I asked as we walked back to the apartment. The question had been weighing on me since we left. The sidewalk was cracked in places, small weeds pushing up through the concrete, persistent life finding a way through. They might, she admitted, but they'd have to admit why you left in the first place. And I don't think they want that kind of attention. Her logic made sense, but it didn't completely ease my fear. I still found myself looking over my shoulder, scanning faces in crowds for my dad's angry glare or my mom's disapproving frown. That night, I discovered my parents had found another way to attack. My phone lit up with messages from relatives and family friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, people I barely remembered were suddenly very concerned about my whereabouts. Your poor mother is worried sick. How could you do this to your family? Your father says you've been hanging out with a bad crowd. The story they were telling was that I'd run away to live with a boyfriend, that Millie had encouraged me to rebel, that I was breaking my parents' hearts. Each message twisted the knife, rewriting our history to make me the villain. The familiar guilt crept back in, the programming so deep it was hard to resist. They're trying to control the narrative, Millie said when I showed her. They know if people hear what really happened, they'll lose their perfect family image. She scrolled through the messages, her expression hardening with each one. The lamp cast shadows across her face, making her look older, wearier. I scrolled through the messages, feeling sick. The words blurred together, a chorus of accusations and guilt trips. No one's going to believe us, are they? The thought was devastating. frustrating, that after everything, we might still be the ones painted as wrong. Millie was quiet for a moment, then she said, "Show me those recordings again." Her voice had that determined edge I recognized. She was formulating a plan. I pulled out the iPod and played a few of the clearest ones. My dad screaming about what a disappointment I was, the sound of something, me, hitting the coffee table. My mom's cold voice telling me to clean up my own blood. The audio was tinny through the small speaker, but the rage in his voice was unmistakable, the fear in mine undeniable. "People will believe this," Millie said firmly. "We just need to be strategic about who we send it to." Her confidence bolstered mine. Maybe the truth could win out after all. We started with Aunt Dorothy, my mom's sister, who had always been a little kinder than the rest of the family. She lived 3 states away and only saw us at major holidays, but she'd always brought thoughtful gifts and asked genuine questions about our lives. We sent her a brief email explaining that I'd left home because of abuse, with one audio clip attached. The message was simple, factual, without emotional appeals. Her response came the next morning. "I always suspected. Your mom has been making excuses for your dad's temper for years. What do you need?" It wasn't much, but it was something. A crack in the wall of silence. A tiny beam of light breaking through. Next was my mom's friend Margaret, who had 2 daughters my age and had always been nice to me. She'd once slipped me $20 when my dad refused to give me money for a school field trip, whispering that it could be our secret. Then my dad's cousin Bruce, who had once pulled my dad aside at a family barbecue after he'd yelled at Evan in front of everyone. Bruce had spoken in low, intense tones, his hand gripping my dad's arm tightly. My dad had been quieter for the rest of that day. Some people never responded. Some sent back shocked messages. A few, like Aunt Dorothy, offered help, money, a place to stay if we needed it, connections to resources. Each supportive response felt like a small victory, a validation that we weren't crazy, that what happened to us wasn't normal or acceptable. "See," Millie said, "not everyone is like them." She showed me a message from our mother's college roommate, who wrote that she'd cut contact with our mom years ago because of concerning patterns she'd noticed. The knowledge that others had seen through my parents' facade was strangely comforting, but the backlash was swift. My parents doubled down on their story, telling anyone who would listen that I was troubled, that I was making things up for attention, that Millie had always been a bad influence. The campaign was coordinated and relentless. They called in favors, leveraged old relationships, spun tales of their perfect family being torn apart by rebellious daughters. My dad's brother called Millie directly. The phone rang late one evening as we were cleaning up after dinner. Millie answered on speaker, her voice neutral until she heard who it was. "You need to stop this right now," he said, his voice cold. "You're tearing this family apart with your lies." He sounded so much like my dad it made my skin crawl. The same cadence, the same underlying threat. "They're not lies," Millie shot back, and the family was already broken. Her voice didn't waver, didn't crack. She stood tall, shoulders back, as if he could see her through the phone. He hung up on her. The dial tone buzzed loudly in the quiet apartment. Millie set the phone down carefully, her movements controlled, but I could see the slight tremor in her hands. Standing up to them still took a toll, even now. 2 weeks after I left home, I still hadn't been back to school. The new school was okay. No one knew me, which meant no one asked questions, but I felt like I was sleepwalking through the days. The classrooms were unfamiliar, the teachers' names hard to remember. I drifted from class to class, taking notes mechanically, speaking only when called on. At night, I had nightmares about my dad finding me, dragging me back home. In the dreams, I couldn't run fast enough, couldn't scream loud enough. I'd wake up gasping, sheets twisted around my legs like restraints. Sometimes Millie would be there, a glass of water in hand, as if she'd sensed my distress from the other room. "Maybe we should talk to someone official," I suggested one evening, like report them or something. We were sitting on the couch, the TV on low in the background, some sitcom with a laugh track that felt jarring against our serious conversation. Millie looked up from her laptop. "We could, but without physical evidence of recent abuse, it might not go anywhere. And if it doesn't," she didn't need to finish the sentence. "If we reported them and nothing happened, they'd be even angrier, even more determined to get me back. The system that was supposed to protect people like us often failed, leaving them more vulnerable than before." "What about the recordings?" I asked. The iPod sat on the coffee table between us, innocent looking despite its damning contents. "They help, but," she sighed, "the system doesn't always work the way it should, especially when the parents are good at presenting themselves as normal." Her fingers tapped a restless rhythm on the keyboard, betraying her frustration. I nodded, remembering how charming my dad could be when he wanted to, how my mom could turn on the concerned parent act in an instant, how they'd fooled teachers, neighbors, friends for years. The thought of facing them in court, of being forced to see them again, made my stomach churn. So what do we do? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. Millie closed her laptop. "We keep building our case, and we make sure as many people as possible know the truth." Her determination was unwavering, a constant in my shifting world. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the other kids like me, trapped in homes where no one believed them, where they had no Millie to help them escape. Kids who went to school with bruises hidden under long sleeves, who flinched at loud noises, who never invited friends over. How many of them were lying awake right now, planning their escape, or worse, believing they deserved what was happening to them? I got up and went to the living room, where Millie was still awake, scrolling through her phone. The blue light illuminated her face in the darkness, highlighting the shadows under her eyes. She looked up when I entered, immediately alert. "I want to tell our story," I said. "All of it, publicly." The words came out with a certainty that surprised me. She looked up, surprised. "Are you sure? Once it's out there, you can't take it back." Her concern was valid. Going public would mean exposing ourselves completely, opening our lives to scrutiny and judgment. I'm sure, and I was. For the first time in a long time, I felt absolutely certain about something. The next day, I sat down and wrote everything, from my earliest memories of my dad's rage to the final blow that knocked me unconscious. I described my mom's enablement, Evan's transformation, Millie's attempts to help. The words poured out of me, years of silence finally breaking. I didn't use our real names, but I included enough details that anyone who knew us would recognize the story. When I finished, I read it to Millie. Her eyes were wet by the end. "It's perfect," she said. "But are you absolutely certain you want to post this?" Her hand rested on mine, warm and steady. I nodded. "I want other kids to know they're not alone, and I want our parents to know they can't silence me anymore." The decision felt right, like stepping into sunlight after years in a dark room. I created a new social media account and posted my story, along with a few of the clearest audio clips. Then I sent the link to everyone in our extended family and my parents' social circle. My finger hovered over the send button for just a moment before pressing it firmly. No going back now. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Messages poured in, some supportive, some accusatory, some from complete strangers sharing similar experiences. My post was shared hundreds of times within the first day. People I'd never met were commenting, sharing their own stories, offering resources and support. It was like a dam had broken, releasing a flood of shared pain and resilience. And then came the fallout. My mom's church friends stopped visiting their house. My dad lost a part-time contract job when his boss recognized his voice from one of the audio clips. Evan dropped out of school and, according to Aunt Dorothy, started disappearing for days at a time. Their carefully constructed facade was crumbling, exposing the rot beneath. "You've ruined everything," my mom texted me. "I hope you're happy." The message came late at night, probably after a few glasses of wine. I could almost hear her bitter tone through the text. I didn't respond. For the first time, I truly understood that their happiness had always depended on my silence, my compliance, my willingness to absorb their abuse without complaint. Their perfect family was built on my broken spirit, and I refused to rebuild it for them. A month after my post went viral, Millie and I were eating dinner when someone pounded on the apartment door. The sound was so unexpected, so violent, that I dropped my fork with a clatter. We froze, looking at each other in alarm. The pounding came again, harder this time, making the door rattle in its frame. "Who is it?" Millie called, not moving from her chair. Her voice was steady, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand slowly reached for her phone. "Open this door right now." My dad's voice, slurred but unmistakable. My blood turned to ice. The room seemed to tilt around me, the walls closing in. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. "How did he find us?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the continued pounding. My hands gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. Millie grabbed her phone. "I don't know, but he's not getting in." Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed her fear. She dialed quickly, speaking in low, urgent tones to someone on the other end. Later, we discovered that one of our distant relatives, cousin Roy, had seen us us at a nearby grocery store and tipped off my parents. He'd always been my dad's favorite drinking buddy and apparently felt more loyalty to him than to our safety. The betrayal stung, even though we'd never been close to Roy. The pounding continued, along with a stream of threats and obscenities. Each impact made me flinch. Each word brought back memories I'd been trying to suppress. Millie called the building manager, who said he was calling the police. The minutes stretched endlessly as we waited, listening to my dad's rage through the door. Your father's hammered, she whispered to me. He's making a scene in front of all the neighbors. There was a grim satisfaction in her voice. He was showing his true colors to strangers, confirming everything we'd said about him. I nodded, too terrified to speak. We sat in silence, listening to my dad's rage through the door. His words slurred together, but the hatred in them was clear enough. I know you're in there. You can't hide from me. His voice was hoarse from shouting, but he showed no signs of stopping. I could picture him on the other side of the door, face red, veins bulging in his forehead like they always did when he was in a rage. Then suddenly, other voices, the building manager, and then the firm tones of police officers. The shouting stopped. We heard muffled conversation, then footsteps moving away. The sudden silence was almost as jarring as the pounding had been. The building manager knocked softly. He's gone. The police escorted him off the property and issued a trespass warning. Are you both okay? His voice was kind, concerned in a way that made my throat tight with unexpected emotion. Yes, Millie called back, though her face was pale. Thank you. We listened to his footsteps retreat down the hall before either of us moved. The danger had passed, but the fear lingered, a heavy presence in the room. That night we packed our essential belongings again. The routine was becoming familiar. What to take, what to leave, how to disappear. The next morning, Millie called in sick to work, and we moved to a different apartment in another part of the city, one where our parents wouldn't find us. The new place was even smaller than the last, but it had a deadbolt and a peephole in the door. Small comforts that meant everything. We can't keep running forever, I said as we unpacked in the new place. Boxes surrounded us, our lives once again reduced to the essentials. The constant movement was exhausting, the vigilance draining. We won't have to, Millie promised. They'll give up eventually. She arranged mugs in the cabinet, creating a semblance of home in this new space, but I wasn't so sure. My dad's rage had always been relentless, and now we'd humiliated him publicly, made him lose face with his friends, his colleagues, his community. People who had once respected him now whispered behind his back. His pride wouldn't let that stand. 2 months after we moved to the new apartment, I got a single text from Evan. You were right. I'm sorry. I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the reply button. The message was timestamped 2:17 a.m., sent in the middle of the night, perhaps in a moment of clarity or regret. Part of me wanted to respond, to ask if he was okay, to tell him he could join us if he wanted to escape too. The brother I remembered from childhood, the one who tucked blankets around me and told me I was pretty, still existed somewhere inside the angry young man he'd become. I wanted to reach that person, to offer him the same lifeline Millie had thrown to me. But another part remembered how he'd changed, how he'd become my dad's mini-me, how he'd watched my abuse and done nothing, how he'd participated in it, adding his own cruelty to the mix. The memory of pasta flying from his mouth as he screamed at Millie was still vivid, still painful. I deleted the message without responding. Maybe someday I'd be ready to forgive him, to help him, but not yet. Not when the wounds were still so fresh. The nightmares gradually became less frequent. I started therapy, funded partly by Millie and partly by a part-time job I picked up at a bookstore. The quiet environment suited me, the orderly rows of books comforting in their predictability. I made a few friends at school. I stopped flinching when people raised their voices. Small victories, but meaningful ones. One day, I realized I wasn't wearing my mom's necklace anymore. I couldn't even remember when I'd taken it off or where I'd put it. It felt symbolic somehow. The breaking of the last chain tying me to that house. The small gold heart had once seemed precious, a rare token of affection from a woman who rarely showed it. Now it seemed like what it was, a cheap trinket given to buy my silence and compliance. Millie noticed the change in me too. You stand taller now, she said one evening. You look people in the eye. We were washing dishes together. The mundane task transformed into something peaceful by the absence of tension, of fear. I smiled. I learned from the best. The compliment made her duck her head, embarrassed but pleased. As the months passed, the messages from my parents became less frequent, then stopped altogether. The last one, from my mom, simply said, I hope someday you'll forgive us. I didn't respond to that one either. Forgiveness might come someday, but it would be on my terms, not theirs. It would be because I was ready to let go of the pain, not because they deserved absolution. On the 1-year anniversary of the day I left home, Millie surprised me with a small cake after dinner. It was nothing fancy, just a simple chocolate cake with a single candle stuck in the center. But the gesture brought tears to my eyes. What's this for? I asked. The flame wavered slightly in the air between us, casting a warm glow on her face. Your Independence Day, she said, smiling. 1 year of freedom. Her eyes shone with pride, not just for me, but for us, for what we'd accomplished together. I blew out the single candle, making a silent wish for many more years just like it. Years of safety, of growth, of healing. Years where I could become the person I was meant to be, not the frightened girl I'd been forced to be. The next day, I sat down at my computer and started typing a new post. Not about trauma this time, but about healing. About finding strength in the aftermath of abuse. About building a new life from the ashes of the old one. The words came easily, flowing from a place of hard-won wisdom rather than pain. I titled it The Voice They Couldn't Silence and hit publish. My story no longer belonged to them. It belonged to me. The power of that realization settled over me like a warm blanket, comforting and secure. I sat back in my chair, watching the view count climb on my post. Within hours, it had reached thousands. Comments poured in, some from survivors sharing their own stories, others offering support, a few even asking how they could help friends in similar situations. It felt surreal to see my pain transformed into something that might actually help others. You're trending, Millie said, peering over my shoulder at the screen. How does it feel? She rested her hand on my shoulder, a gesture that once would have made me flinch but now felt natural, comforting. I shrugged, not sure how to put it into words. Weird, good weird, I think. How could I explain the strange mix of vulnerability and power, of exposure and freedom? My phone buzzed with a notification, another comment on my post, this one longer than most. I clicked to expand it, curious what this stranger had to say about my life. I never told anyone what happened in my house. Reading your story made me realize I'm not crazy. I'm showing this to my school counselor tomorrow. Thank you. The simple message hit me hard, bringing fresh tears to my eyes. Someone else would get help because I'd been brave enough to speak. My throat tightened. This is why I did it, I whispered to Millie, showing her the comment. This was the purpose that had emerged from my pain, to be the voice I needed to hear when I was trapped and silent. She squeezed my shoulder. You're braver than I was at your age. Her voice was thick with emotion, with pride. That's not true. You stood up to them when no one else would. I turned to look at her, this sister who had saved me in every way a person could be saved. And look where it got us, she said with a half smile, gesturing around our tiny apartment. The space was small but filled with light, with books and plants and small treasures we'd collected together. No shouting, no fear, no walking on eggshells. Exactly. Free.